Do you even remember how you intro your videos? Not really, it's been a while. Hi, my name's PB and welcome to PB's Dice Den. In this video, I'm going to finally do what I said I was going to do when I first kind of rebranded this channel, which is talk about Foundry. And we have kind of talked about Foundry, comparing it to other systems, but in this video, I'm finally going to get started on actually like how to run stuff in Foundry, and we're going to start shifting gears a little bit into talking about some of my favorite features about Foundry. So, in this video, let's just get right into it. How do we set up using Foundry? Okay, so this is the Foundry user interface. I'm currently running it on version 11, so if you're watching this a little bit after it comes out, it might be a slightly newer version. In fact, I'm specifically on version 11, build 313. You can see that there is an update available. I haven't updated it at the moment, and I'll get on to why in just a moment. But let's just first do a very quick tour of the actual user interface. So here we can see my game worlds. This is the first thing that loads up. These are literally just the different games that I run. I've got a couple of different ones. Some of them I haven't used in a while. If you're wondering why there's a blurred one, it's because some of my players watch my videos, and that's a secret one for one day in the future. But most of them are fine to be seen. We've got my old Star Wars one. We've got Sundered Empire, which if you check out my channel, that's one of the campaigns we've ran. This was a campaign I ran off stream. That's a campaign I ran off stream. A couple of other ones that I've like dabbled with. I say two blurred ones. I've just noticed there's a second one that I'm going to need to blur. It's fine. And then we've got our this is our new Star Wars system. I'm going to talk about that in a later video about how I set up to run Star Wars Saga Edition within this. And then we've got Dragon Riders, which is my current D&D campaign. Now, it's technically not just for campaigns. You can have multiple games run off the same world. Strictly speaking, Dragon Riders, Fates and Tides, and Sundered Empire, which is down at the bottom, they're all Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I technically didn't need to launch a new game world to run a new game, but it makes sense to me, right? If they're going to be distinctly different in any way, I just like to keep them in their own kind of place, essentially. If we go to this middle tab over here, we've got game systems. These are the different types of games you can run, the different role-playing games that you can run. So again, I'm going to blur some ones that I am one day going to run for my players, so you're not going to see all of them. Again, apologies about the blurring of stuff. It's just because I'm secretive and conniving and what have you as a GM. But you can see here we've got D&D 5th edition. You've got Degenesis. You've got Star Wars. You've got another Star Wars that I apparently at one point installed. Another Star Wars. I apparently have a lot of Star Wars that I've tried out. Got some other ones here. You can see here, if I want to install a new system, I just click this button. And in a minute, it's going to load up all the available packages. I can then search for something. So I can see it here. If I wanted to run Shadowrun as an example, those are the 3 different versions of Shadowrun that are available. Now, with a lot of Foundry systems, they're not built by the the creators of the actual game usually. They're usually built by fans who have coding experience. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good. Some of them have been fantastic, but it does mean that sometimes there are some limitations as to how regularly they get updated. And if you run into any bugs, potentially it might take a while for those bugs to get fixed because they tend to be smaller teams. But all of your big ones, Dungeons & Dragons, they're going to be made by teams that work really, really consistently. I actually don't know whether this is already been updated or not. As of recording this, Foundry recently actually announced that they've teamed up with Wizards of the Coast to bring through it says right there in front of me, the official Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game system. So I imagine it has been updated, and I just haven't updated to the newest version yet. So yeah, Wizards of the Coast have actually teamed up with Foundry. That does happen from time to time. If I close out of this and show this one down here, Savage Worlds, I know that one is supported directly by the creators of the game. So yeah, there are some that, as I say, are directly kind of supported, and others that are made by pretty small teams. And so sometimes you'll get like varying degrees of like support. If you want to update a single one, you can just click this symbol here to check for an update, and it'll tell you if there is an update available, and then you can install it. Or you can just click this, which will just run a search for all of the different systems you've got installed, and update them all. You then got the third tab up the top, which is add-on modules, and we're going to talk about modules a lot on this channel, but not a lot in this video. I've talked about them before. Modules are basically modifications to Foundry, ways that you can change how your game runs and the different things you can do within it. This is where I think the true power of Foundry gets unlocked. Sure, running it completely off of your machine and having only limitations in terms of your storage is a massive boon to Foundry, and it's probably one of the big selling points. It is something that I absolutely adore, but these, I think, are really where it's at. These really allow you to enhance your game and customize your game and truly make it your own, and I think it's what makes Foundry truly special, is that this very, very similar in function to the game system screen. If I want to install a module, I can search for it up here. It will load in a moment. There are some premium ones where you have to be, like, you know, supporting a Patreon or what have you to get access to them. You also can put a link directly to the .json or JSON file. I call them JSON files. I have no idea if that's what they're actually called. But if you can't find it on here, maybe it's not on Foundry's actual, like, module directory, I guess, for want of a better term. But if you can find the GitHub page and you can link to the .json file in there, you can download it anyways, which is also really, really cool. You can also see, obviously, the different categories of them, so you can see the different sorts of things that are supported here. You can also see there's a lot, 2,419 currently. How many do I have installed? It doesn't tell me by clicking that. Okay, I don't know how many I've got installed. Probably too many. And then again, if I wanted to update all of them, I just click the update all button, or I can update them individually by searching for an update for them. Cool. That's the basics of just this user interface. Obviously, on the right hand side here, we've got news, we've got featured content, I've got warnings, which I have 50. To be frank, my games run fine. I think that for the most part, these are just like, hey, you might run into issues. A lot of these are ones that I don't even run anymore, so they're not going to be causing big issues anyways. But either way, you get warnings there if there are potentially going to be issues. You've got your overall settings for Foundry, which I'm just like quickly scanning to see if I'm going to have to blur anything else out. I don't think there's anything that has to be blurred out on here, so we're all good in that regard. You can set an administrator password, you can decide what file paths Foundry uses, etc. Here I can check that update, so that's where I went before to check what version of Foundry I'm on, and I can obviously check for an update and then update if I want to. There's a couple of other settings here as well, and I can then manage my backups, which is something that Foundry introduced to Foundry 11. If you're still running an older, I think it was 11, might have been 10, but I think it was 11. If you're still running an older version of Foundry, one of the really big benefits to the recent updates is that you can now back up automatically, and if you also want to quit or log out of the application, you can do that as well. So that's the basic gist of it. I also just noticed that the version number's at the bottom and I didn't have to, anyways, doesn't matter. So that's the basic gist of it. If I want to launch a world, it's as simple as clicking that world. If I haven't launched it recently, and the system's been updated and what have you, it might take a while to load, but if I've got one that I've recently launched, such as Dragon Riders, it's going to launch it pretty quickly because it doesn't have to do any data migration, so it's just going to take a moment. There we go, and then you can choose who you want to join in. Obviously, if you're creating a world from scratch, which we're going to do in just a moment, you won't have all of your players listed here, but if you have created them all, then you can see all of them here as well, which is great because it means I can log in as other people and just have a look, see what they see, which is quite useful. But if you're the Game Master, you just want to join that, you can also set passwords for different users, including the Game Master, and then you just need to click Join Game Session. You can also put in details like a description of the world or when you're next going to play and such like. I don't bother doing those things personally in Foundry, but you absolutely can. It's then going to take a while to load your game depending on how big everything is that's currently in the game. There are various ways to optimize it to make it load a little bit faster, but basically the more stuff it has to load to be able to run the game, the longer it's going to take. You can see here it's just finishing off loading up the map that I've left it on, which is my world map. you can choose whatever map you want to be the one that loads when you next boot up the server by making sure it's the activated one, which I'll show you in just a moment. Up at the top, I've got maps that I have made navigationable, which means that they're just easy to access up at the top here. It's taking a while to load this map. I think it's probably because I'm recording. It normally doesn't take this long to load. It absolutely is, because Foundry is frozen for me. There we go. So yeah, once it loads, you'll load into the map that you currently have activated. Again, if you've created a world, then you'll see in a moment that you won't have a map just yet. And you've got all of your other maps that you've made navigationable, if that's a word, navigatable. You've toggled navigation for them. They will appear up at the top here. So you don't have to have every single map that's in your world visible here, but it just means that if I want to get to one of these quite quickly, I can just click them. I can load into them without making the players load into them by just left clicking, or I can right click and click activate to make that the new scene that everyone's in. Over on the left hand side here, we've got various UIs. Lots of these have been added on because I've got various modules running. So in a minute, we're going to go back to the default world, or create a new one I should say. Over here we've got the chat, and then various other tools like a combat tracker, scene folders, actors, items, etc. So that's the basics of loading into a world. Let's actually go and create one. So to create a new world, all I need to do is click create world. It's going to ask me for a name. Let's just call this test, and you can see here that it's immediately creating a folder, saying it's going to put it in the data folder within the worlds folder, and then it's given it a name. I can rename that if I want. Let's just see. Perfect, I've got a folder over here. So I've got my Foundry installed on my third hard drive, and so if I go into the data folder there, this is my Foundry data folder. Yours, if you've just installed Foundry, is going to be a lot cleaner. I don't just use this for all the stuff that Foundry puts in there. I put a bunch of stuff in here myself as well, because it makes sense for it to all be in the same place to me. You might not want to have everything be in your Foundry data folder. You might want it on, different folders, potentially on different hard drives and what have you. But to me, it makes sense that pretty much everything I need to be able to run any of the games that I run is here. So, I've got my D&D 5e stuff folder, which has then got token art for different characters and monsters. It's got a bunch of images for magic items. It's got a couple of different rule books that I've purchased. I've got my Roll20 folder, which is still called Roll20 from back when I used to run on Roll20. It's just got all of my map making stuff in it. I've got music in here. I've got sound effects. Is it in? Yeah, Star Wars sound effects, and then I've got my Star Wars soundboard, which is a separate folder because I use a soundboard and sound effects. It's complicated. I do weird things. Basically, you don't have. What I'm saying here is that you can put other stuff in here than just what Foundry puts in here. But this is the Foundry data folder, and the file and the folder it's going to create is going to be in the data/worlds folder. So if I open my worlds folder, this is all of the games that I run. So all the ones here are here. Not all of them have the exact same name. So like Dragon Riders isn't called Dragon Riders: A Song of the Damned. It's called Dragon Riders. This is actually Sundered Empire. It's Asunder, because originally Sundered Empire was going to be called Asunder. I then changed it to Sundered Empire, but changing the folder name is... You probably don't want to change the folder name, is basically what I'm going to say. I'll explain why in a little bit, but yeah, you probably don't want to do that. You also can see I've got a backup there of Star Wars Test, which, funnily enough, Star Wars Test was what we ran the entirety of Star Wars Leviathan on. Anyways, so yeah, it's going to create a folder within your worlds folder, and that's just where anything to do with that specific world can go, including what it's mainly used for, maps. Next, we need to choose a game system, and it's going to show you all of the systems you've got installed. Obviously, if you don't see the one you want here, it means you haven't installed it, so you just want to go to your game systems tab and find it and install it. So for the purposes of this, most people probably play D&D 5th edition. Let's make a D&D 5th edition world. You can create a background image. That's how we get these fancy images like this. Some systems, I think Starfinder as an example, comes with a default one if you don't change it. You can create a custom one. So I could go in here and say, I actually don't know what Cantina looks like. Cantina's a map. Anyways, I could select one of these images. I'm actually not going to do it, but yeah, you could do that. I've not actually noticed this before. You can choose between the default page theme and the minimal page theme. Don't know what minimal looks like. Let's launch it just to see. You can set a date and time, and you can write a world description. You can also add images to the world description, etc., etc. Go wild with it. Do whatever you want with it. But once you're done, click Create World. Alright, and that's where I'm going to leave it for this video because, if you can't tell, future me wearing a different shirt, but while I was editing it, realised that the video recording that I did to just talk about the basics of Foundry was over an hour long, and that's not because it's overly complicated. I could probably talk just as long about any other virtual tabletop, but it's just, I cover a lot of detail, and that's probably not what everyone wants for a video. So instead, I'm going to break this down into smaller chunks. And so yeah, it's the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to go into a little bit more depth about kind of setting up players and setting up characters and just the user interface once you're actually in a game, rather than what we covered today, which was kind of like the setup and like landing page. So yeah, that will be up shortly. By breaking it up into small chunks, I can get these videos out quicker. So that's the idea. So, hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time, and let's roll some dice. Bye-bye.